Greetings and welcome to your destination. You've reached the Psychological Wellness Hub. We aim to help you build your knowledge and wellness around better understanding mental health and psychological concepts. Welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is a part 3 in the video series on personality disorders. In this video, we'll explore more about functional categories in personality disorders. We will cover the first type in this video, known as personality organization in personality disorders. The hope here is that you will learn more about working on your personality disorder. If working with a therapist, remember, or watch the video on this channel, we are here to help you help yourself. This is another way to tap into that. See more on psychological wellness skills to build further on this. To learn more about specific personality disorders, please look back at the description for links or select the channel library playlist for a specific personality disorder to watch more and learn about. What is personality? For more in-depth knowledge on this, please watch the videos on this channel, Personality Intro Part 1 and Personality Expanded Part 2. See the description below for that playlist. What is a personality disorder? For more in-depth knowledge on this, please watch those videos on the channel, Personality Disorder. See it in the description below for the playlist. What is a personality disorder protection system? Each of our personalities have a function to it to operate and to serve and protect us. When we rely too much on this protection system, we can have a problematic personality functioning or a full personality disorder. What does a functional category in personality disorders do or look like? In this section, we'll talk about categories and depth of your personality disorder. The point is to examine that the personality disorders exist on a continuum, or like a range or scale, from one side to the other. How functioning of the personality you have goes from more mild difficulties to more in-depth difficulties. There are two different types of these we will cover. The first one will be covered in this video, and the second will be covered in the next. These will not be exhaustive, meaning they will only cover an overview and not every single detail. There are also other ways of describing these out in the behavioral sciences, but we will focus on these two. These come from sources other than the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and point out some of the limits of the DSM. In other words, other aspects of mental health functioning that is not covered there. See more on theories and differences between DSM and the PDM in that video. If you haven't watched Personality Disorders Part 2, please do so before watching this video. This will go over some of the terms used to describe categories below in this particular video. For some of you, this will come easy to understand, and for others, it may be more difficult. Nonetheless, we will keep covering it further over other videos in this series and elsewhere to work towards making it more clear. So keep watching and deepening your understanding. In the first type, we'll examine there are three main categories or stages to the range or continuum of personality functioning. We will call this personality organization. Let's take a look at the diagram by Kernberg, 2008. The first is more of a mild functioning impairment. This is referred to as neurotic level personality or neurotic personality organization. Neurotic personality disorders tend to be characterized as tense, negative, engaged in negativism, self-depreciating or self-dejection. This is that self-approval or beating self up. Uptight, emotional over-control versus emotional lack of control to influence oneself and relationship. Overthinking, under versus overconfidence, over versus under independence. Neurotic level or organization, which is referred to as NPO, functioning with a personality disorder at this level involves intact and unorganized identity. Using chronic psychological defenses that involve neurotic functioning, such as rationalizing, intellectualizing, ruminating, obsessing, overanalyzing, isolation of affect. What we mean here is cutting off or stuffing your emotions, and more. In reality versus fantasy, neurotic personality disorders tend to use hyper-rational rather than facing emotions in an unhelpful manner. Some neurotic personalities, like at the lower end of NPO, increase their use of fantasy in an unhelpful manner. For example, a neurotic level person who has a narcissistic personality disorder, this person will be preoccupied with fantasy of their status and their accomplishments. It's like when we psych ourselves up and point out our value to take on a tough situation we're going into. The narcissist at this level uses a fantasy or a distorted view of themselves. We often used to do this when we were kids to escape difficult times, or to draw, or to just dream. Remember thinking as a kid, I wanted to grow up and do this, rather than facing the reality of being a kid and not being a grown-up, knowing that you have to go through that before you can do that. Anxiety. Anxiety is generally an uncomfortable, intense level in our striated and smooth muscle systems. Emotional weather. MPO is like when a heavy thunderstorm occurs. Some MPO personality disorders work to contain the thunderstorm from being observable to others, kind of that emotional restraint, that hyperrationality, where there's increased internal tension and outside stoicism, basically having that game face on so you're not showing you're vulnerable or emotional at all. This also goes to lower levels of MPO personality functioning, where we'll let the thunderstorm become more observable in our actions, and the increased use of fantasy. Sense of accountability, right versus wrong principle. In this, we are referring to one being more hyper-judgmental, making their moral compass a priority over anything else. On a more functionally impaired side, we rationalize breaking from what is right and justifying it more often. This category often involves personality disorders like obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, depressive masochistic personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, hysteric personality disorder. This includes some more adaptive versions of histrionic personalities and more adaptive versions of narcissistic personality disorder. At the end of the scale or range of NPO is a category called BPO, or borderline personality organization, or for short, borderline organization. Borderline, if you imagine visually, meaning on the border between two categories, neurosis and psychosis. Borderline organization personality disorders tend to be characteristic as trouble with impulses, emotional instability, fragmented or poorly integrated identities, difficulties with restraint. We really struggle to hold in our impulses. Frantic or impulsive responses with others. Much more social difficulties with others compared to neurotic organization. Identity. In borderline organization, there are some personality disorders with identity difficulties from a high level to more of a severe impairment with identity. At the moderate to severe level, we get more lost about ourselves, and we look more to others to define who we are in a severe manner, because our identity becomes more fragmented. For example, it is common in borderline personality disorder to have someone called the FP, or their FP. And this we're referring to as the favorite person, or their favorite person. This person is a significant attachment figure for the person afflicted with borderline personality disorder. The person with borderline personality disorder projects their identity onto their FP. The upside is that they can use this person to move towards stability. However, this is not without some large challenges. For example, when the same person projects above, they project all their capabilities into the FP. Like when we were young children, depend on our parents. We put our identity, our will, our reality, and much more in the stock of that person, rather than using and capturing these skills to use for ourselves. This puts us at risk for a defense called splitting. When we use splitting, we see ourselves and others as all good or all bad, and nothing in between. It's like those parts are separated or they're split off from one another. Our awareness and our identity is split off from other aspects of our identity and our understanding of ourselves and others. We'll talk about that in another video. Psychological defenses. In borderline organization, we are prone to several hurtful defenses that we over-rely on. Things like intense omnipotence, severe forms of repression, projection, splitting, social and personal sadism, hypochondriasis. That means when we start to internalize our mental problems into our body. They kind of funnel into our body. We start feeling more sickly. For example, a lot of stress, we can start to develop ulcers in our stomach, and many more. Reality versus fantasy. In borderline organization, we struggle more. So in splitting in both reality and fantasy, we have a hard time in balance with these two. Anxiety. In borderline organization, anxiety moves into the smooth muscles, where we are more prone to body difficulties, which can lead into anxiety produced or inflamed in the body. It can inflame even medical issues that we already have, that already exist, or create new ones. For example, we can get GI or tummy issues, like we mentioned earlier with the ulcers. We can get things like IBS. We can get body pain, like constant neck pain. We can get headaches. At the more severe end, one can become more unhinged in their lack of anxiety tolerance. This can range from disassociation to disorganization to becoming more combative and aggressive. Emotional weather. Borderline organizations like a Category 4 or 5 hurricane or like an F4 or F5 tornado. The emotional weather becomes very intense and goes to the most extremes. Sense and accountability, right versus wrong principle. On this level, we have extreme views of being judgmental. Our superego, which is our reality principle or our conscience, it becomes primitive and attacking. We attack ourselves and others with fierce intensity. Our fears or perceived threats of being judged by others or ourselves can severely impact our actions, leading to a destruction of relationships around us with strangers and people we care about. This category often involves personality disorders like less adaptive forms of histrionic personality disorder, less adaptive and more severe forms of narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, as we mentioned earlier, hypomanic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. At the end of the scale or range of BPO, or borderline organization, is a new category called PPO, or psychotic organization. When we mention psychotic here, we do not necessarily mean the traditional sense of someone seeing and hearing things that are not there, that are quote-unquote psychotic. Not in the sense of a constant disorder like that. Though personality disorders in this, and in some cases the previous level, borderline personality organization, individuals can experience temporary psychotic-like experiences under enough distress. Psychotic, if you're imagining visually, meaning on the fringes or just on the line past borderline, about to dip into what we referred to earlier as full-on psychosis. At this stage or category, one has enough significant trouble and chronic distress that they are flirting with falling over the line completely into psychosis. So if you imagine like schizophrenia, where someone might regularly hear voices and have delusions. In the case of psychotic organization, it's like being pre-schizophrenic or on the edge of it, at most risk for it in our personality disorder. So with psychotic organization, there tends to be characterized as difficulty with trouble with impulsiveness, emotional instability, fragmented or poorly integrated identities, or completely devoid of identities, as one becomes consumed by their personality disorder, difficulties with restraint, frantic or impulsive responses with others, much more difficulties with others compared to borderline and neurotic organization. Very poor attachment, often feels odd or off-put by others to a large degree. May feel completely comfortable being away from others, almost like comfort in solitude. May feel intruded upon by others to the point of absolute separation from others. Think about like a hermit crab. Some become even paranoid, but don't necessarily have full-on paranoia, like we see in schizophrenia and other conditions. Identity, again, fragmented, poorly integrated identities, or completely devoid of identities, meaning not having one, right? As one becomes consumed by their personality disorder. Think along the lines of someone who might have autism spectrum, especially closer to autism. On the exterior, they may seem completely indifferent to others, like they're in their own world, almost like they can't even acknowledge or see someone else. Or when someone comes towards them, they kind of distance themselves. Someone in psychotic organization realizes this, much like someone who is autistic. However, they are less focused on different types of stemming or channeling behaviors, like seen in the autistic disorder. Psychological defenses, things like projection, severe splitting, psychotic withdrawal, and more. Fantasy versus reality, severe compromised reality testing or balancing between reality and fantasy to the point of pre-psychotic levels. Anxiety. Anxiety moves into the smooth muscles here, where they are more prone to body difficulties, which can lead to anxiety-produced and inflamed medical issues or makes already existing medical issues worse. At the more severe ends of the anxiety and psychotic organization, one starts to experience something called cognitive perceptual disruption, where basically one starts to become distressed to the point where they start to lose contact with themselves. They start to have more trouble concentrating. They start getting kind of drifty, different things like that, which we will go over more later. This becomes more at an extreme level compared to BPO, though it may be on the surface appear less intense or dramatic in comparison. For many that get this level, there can be extreme GI or tummy issues, as we mentioned earlier, things like IBS or ulcers. One's concern at this level can be on health, almost to the point it's pre-psychotic, almost delusional. At more severe ends, one can become more unhinged in their lack of anxiety tolerance, but also appears more dull in comparison to borderline organization. This can range from dissociation to disorganization to becoming combative and aggressive. Emotional weather, like mentioned earlier, this is similar to borderline organization, which we can alternate between being calmer, like inside, like the eye of the hurricane, but with little distress can move to the outer layer, outside the eye of the hurricane, where it can leave a very destructive path. Sense of accountability, right versus wrong principle. There's a more heavier focus on judgment towards others to avoid judgment towards self, and this in psychotic organization. There's more of an indifference to having a moral compass in this particular level of organization. This category often involves personality disorders like the less adaptive versions of paranoid personality disorder, less adaptive versions of the schizoid personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, less adaptive versions of the hypomanic personality disorder, severe or malignant narcissistic personality disorders, and severe forms of, or the severest forms of antisocial personality disorder. What to do about these functional categories of your personality disorder? We will talk about this in other videos. In the short term, watch this video again and apply what you've learned to your situation. Find ways to identify with it. Remember, knowledge is power. Use it. Then watch more videos on this topic. Finally, go to the section on psychological wellness skills to learn more. We hope that you found today's topic was useful for yourself or someone else. Let us know if it was by commenting below. Let us know what you'd like to hear about or what topics could be useful to you by commenting below, and we'll take it under consideration. If you like what you heard today and would like to hear more from Destination Psychological Wellness Hub, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel by selecting the subscribe button below at the top of the screen and clicking the thumbs up. This will help you get the newest content produced by the channel to you. Please tell all your friends and family about this channel and share these videos with them on this channel. Encourage them too to like and subscribe. And as always, we hope your psychological wellness continues to grow with us in this community. Thank you.